top left of Berlingrad. It's our red Protoss player for Team NV, looking to get into the first season of Codex. This is Nightmare.
And of course, one of the most consistent Zerg players, I mean, almost of all time. He's got a really good record of making it into round of 8s, into round of 16s. He knows how to always be one of the best players that there is in Korea. It, of course, is none other than Kitesea Gaming's Solar.
So,
and for Solar.
Oh, you go for it.
I was going to say, and for Solar, it's always something that I talk about when he gets decently deep into tournaments, where it's kind of like it's a blessing and a curse. Where Solar is one of the most consistent, I would say one of the most consistent high-level Zerg players, where he'll constantly be able to play against the best in Korea, and even in Europe, and take games to them. But he's never quite able to reach the level where he closes them out, where he wins those tournaments.
Yeah, I think it is a fair assessment. What I think is even more interesting to compound with that idea is that we see Solar just take really ridiculous series against players maybe 1 or 2 times his power level. We just see him kind of power up himself, and he'll go after. I mean, he'll go after the big foreigner dudes in the EPT Cups. He'll go after the mainstays of the GSL scene. He can be very good, but I think you're absolutely right. I think consistency in his play sometimes can trip him up, and he can find himself in a very, very precarious position against opponents that maybe he should be able to beat, and it doesn't quite close out series that would otherwise net him some very big results.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you always got to think back to, the Maru nukes. There's a reason why they're so iconic. It's not just like, oh, Maru landed a nuke. It's more so Solar. Sometimes in those big moments, it doesn't quite have what it needs to clutch them out. It makes that big mistake. And that's really what does differentiate the very, very best from the level which is just below that, which is where I'd place Solar. If you were on a tier list, you have your S tier, that's your Maru, that's your Dark, Rogue. You put all those players there. Then I would say, honestly, I'd put Solar right in that A tier, right below it. He is honestly such a great player. It's always really awesome to see him play because he always performs well and up to a very, very good level. So, I'm excited to see how he does here. Of course, the expectation, I think, coming to this series is that, oh yeah, Solar's going to 2-0 Nightmare. I think that's always going to be the expectation, just because Nightmare is a player that I don't think a lot of people have seen a lot of, and especially has not had a lot of amazing results. In fact, I don't think he's really had a big result yet.
Well, this is the first step towards getting results in 2022. So getting into this series, taking things very seriously in the winners final of Group C. They're going to get out to his third base a little bit before the 4-minute mark. So a normal march down Protoss building lane, but we're going to see a robotics facility right after the initial Stargate. So Stargate's going to produce an Oracle. It's going to have that Void Ray first. And that's going to be the extent of it. It looks like it's going to be ground forces here for Nightmare.
Yeah. And one interesting thing, Nightmare, of course, from Team NV. And Team NV has kind of taken the mantle from generic Green Wings of just producing talent and cultivating it. We saw that with Maru. We saw that with Bunny, especially. Bunny was a player who was always kind of just, a B tier. He didn't really make big results, but joins Team NV, has Maru as a practice partner, has all these great teammates, and now Bunny is, sometimes when he's really in form, people are like, is this guy the next big Terran? So, there's always that chance for Nightmare. I was just checking out the Aligalac because I was like, what has Nightmare actually done? And interestingly enough, Aligalac, of course, the rating, you don't want to go on that all the time, but has increased quite a bit since joining Team NV. So it's always going to be exciting to see how players change, and especially how much better they get when you see them suddenly in these qualifiers. Oh, wow, they get to the finals. You start to see their names more and more often.
Yeah, and I know that the Korean clubs have not carried the same level of power that they had maybe back in the Kespa days, but there's still definitely something to be said about being connected to the top esports organizations in South Korea. So being able to be a part of Team Envy obviously has had a very positive impact on Nightmare's career thus far, recently. And I mean, again, like you said, he's in the winners final right now, taking on a very talented player in Solar. So being able to capitalize on this will be the next step in his ladder of success. If he's able to make it there, as he does begin to navigate into a more ground-focused army. But Solar, then with the Queen Walk.
Yeah, Solar wants to try and get aggressive here. Does have a lot of units available to him. It is a Void Ray, but there are also Disruptors on the way, and Disruptors, that is one unit that is very able to throw a wrench into the plans of the Zerg if they want to get aggressive. One good hit is all it takes for all those Queens to be knocked down to pretty much 15 HP. And then guess what? They just pop very, very easily after that, or have to use up all their transfuse energy.
Well, and this is kind of an interesting choice here from Solar. He's just going to choose to walk back home. Those boots were made for walking, but they also could just head back home and buy more boots as well, I suppose. So trading those out, not going to walk across the map just yet. Spire goes down on the back side of it. Now, this did go down mid-push, so I think Solar did make the commitment to back off a little bit earlier than he otherwise would have shown it. But this does kind of put Nightmare in a bit of a position as well. So now Nightmare has to come out onto creep with his voids to try and clear things up and figure out, oh, no, a little bit of friendly fire. Nope, totally fine. Not a big deal there. But now, so Nightmare's got to really assess the situation here. He's invested a lot of resources into trying to be able to defend back at home that now cut into his probe count. I mean, Solar's up to 83 to the 67 of Nightmare, and the mobility factor is just not quite there. Solar's got a pretty decent creep spread, and he's got 11 mutas coming out onto the map. So it's not like he's going to be able to just push forward anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, that's the real worry is those 11, now 14 Mutalisks. You don't have Blink yet, you don't have +1 yet, you're just still working on your Stalker count. And getting up this 4th base, so for Nightmare, it's all going to be about this defense, and well, we're not entirely sure if he's going to be able to do it just yet. I mean, this is such a strong army from Solar that's now making its way across the map, and well, Nightmare is pushing out at the same time, so this could get very, very sketchy very quickly if you're suddenly going to be pushing yourself into a base race, and I mean, it doesn't look like either player is going to back up just yet. Nightmare is continuing to go for it. He is committing across the map as the shield battery overcharge is trying to keep his pylon alive so that the cannons continue on firing. As that's going to be the +1 ground attack canceled here by Nightmare. That's a big upgrade to give, but look at the army supplies. 96 for Solar. These Mutalisks, they can stay, honestly. But no, Solar's just committing to the base race, and both these players are going to see who can kill each other faster.
I surprisingly think that Solar's got the better opportunity here. He's going to be able to pick off the Cybernetics core, and he gets a decent amount of the production here. So now this 3rd base is completely vulnerable. The 4th base has only got a couple of voids at it, so that's not going to last very long. And this army of Nightmare is not going to be able to base race quite as effectively. Meanwhile, Solar's got Mutalisk. I think you're absolutely right. The Mutas are going to be the tipping factor here, despite the fact that there is a lot of chaos happening around the map. There's more Mutas in the production tab. +1's actually about to finish as well. If +1's able to finish, that would be a huge up for Solar. But right now, he's got 90 army supply to the 68 of his opponent, and he just has so much more mobility.
Yeah, Nightmare should focus down the Spire. That +1 is so close to finishing, and I don't think it does. Nightmare does get his own +1 ground weapons, I think, finished up, yeah. So he has that upgrade advantage, and if it comes down to a fight, Blink Stalkers, you know, with that +1, the fact that you have the Disruptors as well, here we go, Nightmare's gonna go for the hold, but it's not his whole army that's here, and he doesn't recall all of it, and that is just very, very unfortunate for Nightmare. He needed all of his units to be there. Those ones are gonna get cleaned up, and that means that that's gonna be game GG. Solar gonna take game number 1.
Sorry, I was like leaning out of the way. I've been battling a sinus infection. Like occasionally I'll lean far enough away just to try and like clear my nose a little bit. And I thought like, oh yeah, I got like a couple of seconds here. And then all of a sudden I heard the name and I was like, lurching back. It's all good though. You know, it's just it's the joys of living, I suppose. I was gonna say like the joys of what, spring? Oh, okay.
Yeah. The joy of spring. It's beautiful for like half the time, and then the other half the time you're sick, it's wet, and everything is awful. But yeah, no, I've been in a similar spot. I had a bit of a throat cold going on, a bit of a sore throat, but it's mostly cleared up, which is nice because just in time for casting these series and for getting on with it. But that being said, Nightmare in that game one, nothing looked too egregiously bad, which is of course always good to see. Of course, there was nothing really special. There was nothing really super good, and Solar obviously made the right choices. And really, when it comes down to it, is if your macro is solid, if it's on point, then it's all going to come down to your decision making, realistically. And that's, I think, where Solar does have that upper hand. You know, he has more experience. He has just the fact that he's been playing at a higher level in these more intense situations for longer.
Yeah, I think it's a fair assessment here. And what I think is kind of interesting about these players specifically, especially at the top of the Korean level, is being able to kind of identify when certain styles and choices are being made. So like Solar right now, completely pulling off of gas here, just enough gas to get exactly one metabolic boost, and then leaves himself with nothing. So perfect pull of the workers there, which would lead me to believe that he's going to focus on getting that queen count up just a little bit higher. So we won't see any early roaches. We're not going to see anything too crazy out of Solar, at least in the short term. But the reality is Nightmare's not going to do anything too wild either. He's going to open up with an Oracle this time around.
Yep. Oracle opener. You could get a little bit more aggressive with it. He's not going to send the first one across the map immediately, though. It's actually going into his second Oracle, and that's where you get to see a little bit of the deviation. So you're not going to have the safety of the Void Ray, which does just give you, hey, anti-ground, anti-air. You can clear vision. You can clear out units. It's a great defensive unit. Nightmare is saying, I don't really want that. I'm just going to go for 2 Oracles, and this, of course, means that, hey, if Solar's queens are out of position, then I can get a lot more damage done. But of course, you're really relying on the fact that you have some great micro, and that your opponent is not going to be ready with their queens.
Yeah, in a position where I mean, 2000 Atmospheres already has a pretty nice spot for the ramp in terms of hatchery. So creep spread is going to be able to get up the ramp just a little bit without assistance from a creep tumor, but this is where I think Protoss can benefit, because there are so many dead spaces that you can fly orcs into. Even Void Rays can kind of zip in and out. You forget about them and their existence for a little bit, and then you just kind of dive back and forth. The Nightmare's got to be careful. He can't afford to lose one of those oracles right away. They haven't really found that much damage. Only 2 worker kills here so far, as they are going to have to rotate around. Ooh, okay, shields kind of came back up a little bit there, so not going to take full additional damage. But finding that little harassment, really not the speed that Nightmare should want to play at here. He is going to go for a second Stargate, so Void Rays are going to start being on the menu. We haven't seen +1 get started just yet, so kind of an interesting tale there. I'll be curious to see how invested Nightmare wants to get here, but no additional gateways is a huge sign.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it means that, yeah, Nightmare is just going to be committing to a lot more of these air units. Does lose an Oracle there. Doesn't even really get that much. I mean, you get a drone, you lose an Oracle. It's not that worthwhile so far, these Oracles. And so for Nightmare, is really going to be looking at the late game here as his option, because you're not going to have those mid-game options, those mid-game opportunities, when you've already, you haven't gotten damage done with a double Oracle opener.
+1 did go, so it is going to be a pretty heavy commitment into Sky Toss, at least for now. Third base is already rather saturated as well, so I mean, Nightmare can maybe off of that. Oh, okay, pick off a few workers. That's pretty nice. He can maybe afford, and I'll put afford in air quotes. He can afford to lose the 1 Oracle if he is going to go into more heavy Void Ray production. The Oracles are going to be less useful for that harassment. They might be more for like surprises in terms of, oh, look, you just ran all of your units into a stasis trap. Whoopsie-daisy. But the focus is going to be pretty heavy on maintaining and maneuvering those Void Rays. Now, this is, I think, a delightful exception, as the Oracle is going to start working away on the Zerglings. And now we should start seeing a pretty clear path forward here for the Protoss player, who is going to be able to scout everything out. So a good start, at least for Solar.
Yeah. And for Nightmare, I mean, Flux Veins is on the way. That is Void Ray Speed, which is, you know, it was an upgrade that everyone saw, and they're like, this is going to break the game. And then it didn't really break the game because it's a very niche upgrade. It doesn't really provide that much more power to the unit. And so it really ends up being an upgrade that's very niche. It fits the specific purpose of using these Void Rays as a harassment option, and especially for fighting away Corruptors. For, you know, when you have a big mass of them, then being able to fight and try and get a, you know, a mass of them and try and chase down units. That's what I was trying to say. I couldn't think of the word, but here we go. Solar's coming on in. I mean, the Ravagers, the Queens are stuck behind them, and so you're not getting a lot of this anti-air focused on these Void Rays just yet, since Shield Battery Overcharge only now is being used. Let's see these Void Rays continue to fight it off. It doesn't look like the Queens are able to really get close enough just yet to comfortably make this push work, and almost all of the Ravagers have gone down.
Yeah, this has been a very, very well kept hold here by Nightmare. His Shield Battery Overcharge just getting absolute damage done on the offense here. And now with the Queens just constantly getting choked up, I mean, the reinforcements aren't able to wiggle their way through. Even those Lings are having a difficult time. And there's just still so many shield batteries that have additional energy remaining. Only now are all the shield batteries completely out of energy. But this has not gotten the damage done that it needs to. Now with reinforcing Lings, that could be a changing story here. One cannon is slowly starting to work away on everything. There is an Immortal that is still alive as well. But finally now the Void Rays do have to be pulled back just a little bit. Additional reinforcements will be able to help for both sides. But I think once the Queens start to fall, Titan, that means this push is going to become less and less effective.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you lose these Queens, then these Void Rays, as you now see, Flux Veins is done. They can chase everything down. Doesn't matter if you have speed or not, you are going to fall. Carriers are out, and Solar committed to the attack, committed to the push. It did not work out. The hold was there for Nightmare, who's continuing to produce units now. More carriers on the way, and just, that minerals lost is absolutely insane. Twice as much for Solar, who's already sitting on 4 bases and 75 workers. Doesn't really matter. You're going to get a Void Ray, and then they just run away, and now Void Rays are faster than Corruptors.
Yeah, this is a bit of a brutal situation here for Solar, who needed to find any amount of economic damage at this third base, and there's just nothing. I mean, he hasn't lost a single probe yet this game, and he's got a 4th base already situated here. There's going to be additional warp-ins to deflect against the incoming situation. The 5th base has been scouted out, so it's only a matter of time before that gets populated as well. Nightmare has to be feeling absolutely stupendous in this situation. He's getting his carrier count increasing. He's only going 1 at a time right now. He is doing a decent job of spending, has a little bit of resources floating, but I mean, he's investing in a ground army at this point, getting those valuable Archons that are going to trade so well against the units of Solar. He's just putting himself in an increasingly better position.
Yeah, whenever the Protoss is on equal bases and higher workers, that's when you know that this game is in a pretty bad spot for the Zerg. As Solar, I mean, he's looking to max out and maybe go for another push, but I think he realizes there's no way that he's going to get back into this game in a macro sense. That's not where he's going to find his win, is in a macro game. And you see here, Queens are being brought across the map, but guess what, Solar, you're not in position for Nightmare's attack here on the 4th base. And so that means that now Nightmare is going to try and pounce on top of the units as they're coming on over, and that's a lot of Ravagers that you need to try and stay alive. 2 of them get picked off. The carriers, only 3 of them available now. Void Rays going to try and fight these Corruptors straight up. Those Archons get so much value with their splash damage. And as the Corruptors run away, you see that Flux Veins getting so much value, being able to chase down the Corruptors. The Archon splash, this is just absolutely brutal.
The fact that those Archons are still alive is such an incredible play here for Nightmare. He's been zoning all of these units on the ground, in the air, utilizing those Archons to try and soften up these Corruptors. And the Corruptors are going to be able to win the battle, but they won't win the war. And Nightmare took care of that. Game 2 goes to the Protoss player, and we get a rubber match. Bottom left, it's the blue Zerg player. For Kitesy Gaming, needs to win 1 more if he wants to advance to Season 1 of Code S in 2022. This is Solar.
And in the top right-hand corner, Team NV looking to qualify, and potentially find himself into the best form that maybe he's been in a while. It is Nightmare. And I always forget, and I made this mistake as well, that this is, of course, it's a GSL qualifier, but technically, with the changes that were made recently, they're actually trying to qualify for Code A. Because Code A is the round of 36. And then after that, you have, is it round of 24 now, or is it round of 36? I'm trying to remember off the top of my head.
It's round like 24. The first round of the GSL?
Yes.
It's a round of 20.
It's the round of 20.
Yeah, because it's a new format this year.
Oh, it is. I haven't been able to look at the new format yet.
Yeah, so they actually, I don't believe they do Code A anymore. I believe Code A has been removed from the format, and it is 5 normal, quote-unquote, GSL groups. So it'll be A, B, C, D, and E, all utilizing generic GSL group formats.
Okay. So they've just knocked it down a little bit from the count that they had before. Of course, you still have the 4 players that qualify from the last season, from the semifinals that move on. So those players don't have to worry about qualifiers. They're just like, oh, we're sitting pretty.
Yeah, it's a leaner GSL than we've ever seen before, which is kind of it's received mixed results, right? I mean, obviously there are a lot of people that have been around GSL for the last 11 years and have been able to see like the best of the best compete, and slowly it's dwindled in number, but I think maybe not so much in quality, and we're seeing like probably still some of the best series that we've seen in StarCraft 2, which is a delight to see in 2022. But I know that there are a lot of people that still pine for the days of 32, round of 32, and just having the absolute onslaught of round 32 groups after groups after groups after groups. So that's going to feel a little bit skinnier this year, but what I think will end up taking place, because it's a little bit slimmer, I think we're going to get the better matchups right away, and we're still going to see some incredible stories work their way through. What I would love to see, again, I am biased as a foreigner, but I would love to see as maybe the world starts to better tackle coronavirus and restrictions, maybe, fingers crossed, start to loosen up a little bit around the world, that maybe some of our foreigners who have made themselves opportunities in the GSL, maybe an opportunity to get back and compete again. Because I know, I don't know if you followed all of the qualifiers, but one of the notable foreigners was No Regret, who was able to compete once again. Oh, this is actually a huge scout. Okay.
Yeah, that's actually massive. Ling manages to get on into the main, snags the probe in the wall, and so that means you see the Stargate, you see the Oracle building. So Solar, full information on what is going on, even denies the Adept from getting any damage done. It will manage to escape, though. So Nightmare not losing that unit right off the bat, but Solar getting a lot of value. And as you were saying, with the new format with GSL, things are changing up, but of course there's always, interesting things to be happening. And, there's always the want for more StarCraft. Everyone wants more games. They want to see more players. That's always what, the request is. But we do have Solar here pressing in, going to be able to finally snipe that Adept before getting on out. No option to try and, cancel his third or anything like that. There's no super aggressive play coming out from Solar just yet.
I was like, what are you lying to, homie? He just vibing. Like, I'm not gonna knock that down. We are gonna get Stargate once again. So right now it feels as if when the Protons presented with an opportunity to play against a Zerg player, it's feeling very double Stargate heavy right now. And the addition of that Forge to try and help prevent against Queen Walks, or at least defend, maybe not prevent, but it's definitely an interesting, evolving situation here. It's worked once, it's not worked once. So, I mean, you just got to flip the coin one more time and see if Nightmare can, in fact, hold on. Now, Solar, going to get that information almost immediately here. He's going to see the second Stargate. Will not be able to last so long to really talk about it, but the information has been gathered. So, Lair already on the scene, but a robotics facility back behind it. So, maybe an introduction of some Disruptors soon. Yeah,
I mean, Disruptors, of course, are always very nice for the hold. Immortals are always helpful. Just something to help out when that Queen Walk will come across the map. And, you know, it's Solar. I'm expecting a Queen Walk. It's a build that he really loves to do. It's his favorite response to the double Oracle. We'll have to see if that is the case. However, as more Queens are in production, so far, nothing too crazy, it seems as though, from our Zerg player.
Well, this would actually be a nice little stop here. Solar not quite paying attention to his Queens. Queens get choked up and don't prevent the cancel, but there's no follow-up aggression, so the Natural will just go down once again. It wasn't too terribly far along. Products Bay is going to be added in as well, but looky here. Tight. We got ourselves one of them fancy Nidus networks.
Yeah. Big Worm Boy is going to be coming across the map pretty soon, and so far Nightmare has not been able to scout this out, as it is just pure Lings and Roaches now in production. Once again, the base under fire. Queen's being brought over, but does not look like that's going to matter. Another cancel on this fourth base. And Nightmare, I mean, you see this happen in this Nightmare, you're like, wow, I'm getting a lot of damage done here. I'm really happy with this. But you don't know what's going on at home, because there's that Nidus network finishing up. Now Ravager's on the way, more Lings. That Nidus is going to go down at the fourth base location. That means you're going to be trying to knock down the natural base, not the third. And that is quite worrisome here for Nightmare. As his Void Rays are across the map, he's not ready for this. He might finally scout it out with a probe, but that is far too late, as the Void Rays are not where they need to be. Instead, they're going to try and focus down this layer, but the Queens are all at home still. They haven't been brought across, and that means that they can easily save this, start to focus down. Ooh. The Voids and the Lings are into the natural.
Oh my gosh, that door is wide open. That Adept is gonna not enjoy having their mid-season review after letting that one happen. The cannon's gonna go down in the main, and that means just absolute chaos in the worker line here. Right now, limiting a lot of the damage so far here. Some big disruptor shots taking out some of those Ravagers, so that's going to be follow-up damage that doesn't take care of. But here come the Queens. The Queens are just going to be all by themselves, starting to work away on the wall. These Lings still haven't found an insane amount of damage. I mean, 20 probes have gone down so far over the course of the game. But right now, I mean, Solar's got to find a way to capitalize on this. He's created so much opportunity for himself, but really wasn't able to make much of it.
Yeah, not having the Queens there, he wasn't able to bust down the natural wall. Is working on 10 Corruptors, though. Behind this, the Disruptor shots go out. You got to try and get inside the Nidus Worm. A lot of the Queens do end up falling. That means, hey, I mean, it was good damage from Solar. Sure, you got those 20 worker kills, but what does that mean? You're still sitting with a 3-base Protoss who really isn't disturbed from doing what they want. For Nightmare, you know, he can still get into the Fleet Beacon. He can still look for his 4th base, which he should be doing pretty soon here. He's just starting to build up his army, but this Corruptor count, this is where it can start to get a bit scary. I mean, this is where you can start to see, you know, as we saw from Ragnarok in Group A, these Corruptors just go across the map. They try and snipe units when you have critical mass.
I mean, critical mass is absolutely the term that you got to look for here, and I don't believe he's got enough Corruptors right now to be able to just take this on. Now that looks a little bit better. I mean, 12, I think absolutely could fight that if he's willing to wait out the prismatic alignment. Now he's going to be able to strike here. These are not going to be nearly as effective. There goes a shield battery overcharge, and so it should be able to back off as a result of that. But you're absolutely right. Critical mass is what Solar actually has to be careful of as well. If his opponent is going to try and mass up into those air units, he needs to make sure that he responds appropriately. And taking out as many of these Void Rays as he possibly can is a good way to start, because right now there is a nice investment into those ground army units, and he wants to try and make sure that he maximizes his air units for as long as humanly possible. So taking out those Void Rays that can shoot down is great when you trade them out for units that can only shoot up.
Yeah, I mean, the Corruptors get rid of all of the Voids, and so that means that Nightmare, he's completely focused on all-inning on his ground units. 4 gateways on the way. There's no 4th base in sight. This is going to be an all-in from the Protoss player, but look at it, 182 supply for Solar. Mutalisk on the way. There's not enough Blink Stalkers in the world to save you from that, although, I mean, it's not even Blink for Nightmare. It's Charge. He doesn't have Blink Stalkers available to him, and so these Mutalisks can wreak absolute havoc, which is a phrase I've said multiple times, but it still continues to apply and be very pertinent. It's my favorite word. And, well, I mean, Nightmare, now you're in a bit of a rough spot.
You got some work to do here in this defense. It's 124 army supply to the 75 of your opponent, but honestly, 4 Archons and a set of shield batteries ready to be overcharged at a moment's notice. are possibly the right way to handle it, but being able to handle on 2 different fronts is going to be a bigger story here. Mutas and Corruptors diving on into the natural here. Oh, picking off that Warp Prism could be very, very huge, and that's going to be a big moment. That might be a great moment for Solar to try and punish Nightmare in this moment, because now all of a sudden his opponent cannot be aggressive. He's got to wait for another Warp Prism, or he has to settle for the aggression that he's got right now, and instead he's going to take those Mutas and jump on top of some of the vulnerable units caught in the midway here. Immediately going to start trying to puke on things, but shield battery is going to get activated, so getting out of the way is going to be much better, and trying to force the issue here at the natural is going to be a bigger story.
Yeah, I mean, Nightmare he was hesitating in the middle of the map. His army just didn't do anything for a solid minute and a half there as he was trying to handle everything at home. He's going to recall back his Archons and try and continue with the base race. And these Archons, they are quite good against Zerglings. 4 of them with his shield battery can absolutely make sure that you save your natural. But behind it, what damage are you getting done? You haven't even killed the hatchery. You have to decide. You have to commit to one spot. Charge Launts managing to clean up a bit of this natural base for Solar, but you just haven't committed as Nightmare. You haven't decided. And that's what you need to do, is more Mutas are going to pop on out. You have Disruptor shots going on out. More drones are going to go down, but the 3rd base is forfeit. That means that, well, Nightmare, this is all you got. This is your army. You have to try and win the game with it.
And this is now going to be a situation once again where the Protoss player is not going to have nearly enough speed to be able to out-base race their opponent. And suddenly, units that don't shoot up do really good against units that shoot down. Oh, and the drones! All right, so that's at least a nice little pick-off there, trying to find any sort of value out of those disruptors, but at what cost, Titan? It cost you your 3rd. Your 4th was never able to be established, and now all of your army units have been destroyed. So yeah, you have a few Archons and Stalkers back at home, but without the disruptors to try and anchor the army down, this is a much weaker fighting force.
Yeah, it's going to be hard for Nightmare to make this work. Sure, he has +1 with it, but I don't know if that's enough, and you just have to try and end the game here. More Lings in production. Of course, Zerglings and Mutalisks are not the best against Archons. It's actually a pretty bad fight there for the Mutas, but it might not matter. Shield battery overcharge is going to go down. It's not quite going to matter, though. The Mutalisks are absolutely destroying Nightmare's base. That means that it's all he's got left is just a few Archons, and again, Nightmare, he tries to split up his army, but you just don't have enough units to really afford that. You're bringing 2 Archons back to your natural? Tell me, Rushi, what are 2 Archons going to do?
Well, I mean, in a perfect world, they could completely obliterate a flock of mutas, but, I mean, the semantics that have to go along with that, let alone the complete and utter disregard of Solar's army, like, just is incalculable, as Solar is completely focused on obliterating every last piece of Nightmare's army. There are no workers for the Protoss player. He's about to have no Nexus. I don't know about you, but no workers, no Nexus, there's no win.
Well, I mean, as the saying goes, no money, no problem. So obviously Nightmare is striving for that here, as the Mutalisks are going to dive on top of the Blink Stalkers. +1, I mean, sure, it's very good, but it's not as I have killed Rushi. GG is called. Solar is going to advance out of group number C.